there. Welcome back to meeting number 101, Deja Vu, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, which are resuming today following suspension on Monday. If you recall, on Monday we were deliberating motion from Mr. Bachrach, which we're going to resume shortly. Following this, we'll move back to a RIVECAN study. I want to extend my personal thanks to Mr. Lafleur for coming back, especially on such short notice. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. After that, we're going to move in camera to discuss the issue I texted a couple of you, and then also shipbuilding study and some budgets. Reminder, please don't put earpieces next to the microphone, as this causes feedback. Yes, Ms. Block, I will get to you, as it causes feedback and potential injury to our very valued interpreters. Now, resuming the debate from Mr. Bachrach, I'll just read it out, that the committee undertake a study on the sustainability of postal service in Canada's rural and remote communities. A minimum of 12 hours of witness testimony be dedicated to the topic. The committee invite the CEO of Canada Post, President of CPAA, Minister of Public Services and Procurement, and the committee produce a report and table it in the House. I'll start a speaking list on it. There's Ms. Block, and then Mr. Souza, and then Mr. Bachrach. The original amendment to it had been defeated, so we're back to square one. Go ahead, Ms. Block.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And after some discussions, I believe I would have what is a friendly amendment to the original motion that was put forward by Mr. Bachrach. I move that we amend or we replace a minimum of 12 hours with at least 8 hours and replace sustainability with the word loss, meaning the new motion would read that the committee undertake a study on the loss of postal service in Canada's rural and remote communities, that at least 8 hours of witness testimony be dedicated to the topic, that the committee invite the CEO of Canada Post, President of CPAA, and Minister of Public Services and Procurement, and that the committee produce a report and table it in the House. Thank you. I do have copies in both official languages.
Fine. I will take a speaking order on the amendment. Mr. Bachrach, I see.
Mr. Chair, just to note that I agree with the spirit of the amendment. Reducing the number of hours, we may get to the end of the witness testimony and feel either that the committee wishes to expand the scope of the inquiry or to hear additional witnesses on the topic of rural and remote communities. So I'm happy with this as a starting place, as I've indicated to Ms. Brock, and I'm happy to vote in support of the amendment.
Great. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the time spent cleaning up time to the language that had come up before. So anyone wish to speak to the amendment, Mr. Sousa?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been trying to get an amendment put. But how does that work? Do we have to then vote on this amendment?
We vote on it and accept this, and then we can go to.
We accept the amendment, but not accept that. I just try to understand the process.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll vote on the amendment from Ms. Block, which is just changing to at least 8 hours and then changing one minor wording. Then we're back on to
the original debate, and then I can add my amendment.
On the modified, then yes, we could entertain yours. I see. Mr. Baines?
I'm just wondering if we can still keep the study on the loss and sustainability, because just studying the loss, I think we should make that limits the scope of, we're just studying the loss, but what about sustaining all the sustainability of it also?
Sure, I understand what you're saying. Mr. Bachrach, before I turn to you, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if that really would limit our ability to do the whole study, just so you know. That kind of wording.
Maybe stated at least.
Mr. Bachrach? To do so, we'd have to defeat this amendment then and then include it.
And through you to Mr. Baines, I think the goal here was really to find wording that has a shared understanding around the table. There was some concern that perhaps the word sustainability, because it's a word that now means many things to many people, may lead us down paths that weren't the original intention of the study. So really what we're talking about is the viability and continuation of postal service in rural and remote communities. And the opposite of that is the loss. What we've seen over the years since the 2014 moratorium is we haven't seen more post offices opened in rural communities and remote communities. We've seen post offices go from being proper Canada Post, postmaster provided post offices to franchise model that involves contracting out to other businesses to post office boxes on the side of the road. And that's something that many rural and remote residents are concerned about, and it's certainly something that the Union of Postmasters and Assistants is concerned about. And so I'm hoping that'll be the focus. But really, it's about service levels. How do we maintain service levels for rural residents? And I think, there's lots that we can shoehorn into that scope.
Jory, on the amendment, please.
Yeah, I think the use of loss will actually limit, although it may represent the spirit, but I think it limits, because when we're talking, at least the way I looked at it, when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the viability of Canada Post to continue serving Canadians, provide services, and also be a viable business. So if we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about we could say sustainability of services. And if you're talking about the viability of this as a business, yet ensuring that all those services are provided, I think that was the spirit of the first. That was the spirit that I believe Mr. Bachrach was talking about, that at least I understood in my conversation with him, that's what the conversation was. And that's definitely the premises on which our side has prepared the amendment. Now, if that's not the case, I would ask for about a 1 or 2 minute recess so we can realign on our side of what it is, because Madam Block moving a motion and Mr. Bachrach supporting it, it kind of throws us off a bit.
Could I interject? Perhaps we can suspend. You can share your motion with everyone else, and maybe we can come to a conclusion.
I believe the motion has already been shared with
agreed.
Mr. Block.
Mr. Block?
Mr. Bachrach, sorry. my bad, my bad.
Would we consider a quick suspension to see if everyone is on? Sorry, I have the floor. Would we consider a quick suspension to see if everyone's on board to have Mr. Souza's amendment, if it includes everything suitable to all? Or
Can I just speak very briefly to what Mr. Johari just
sure,
mentioned?
it's technically on the amendment of
on the amendment of Ms. Block. I think the issue here is whether we state it in an aspirational way, where we're stating the positive future we want to create, or whether we use the motion to express concern about the trend that we've observed, which is a negative one. I think the motion as amended would do the latter, express concern about the loss of postal service. Certainly, the discussion of long-term viability and sustainability fits in the context of the loss that we've seen. We want to reverse those losses. We want to see rural communities receive better service. So I'll leave it at that. It seems like maybe that's the distinction here on the two sides of the table. And as I said before, I support the amendment that's been put forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Bachrach, and it's a good point because the long-term sustainability is actually written into the Canada Post Act. Right to Mr. Okay, we're just going to wait a moment before we do the vote because I think Ms. Vignola, you're looking for the amendment, Mrs. Vignola?
And I gave them to the clerk.
Has it gone out?
We're getting some more copies of it.
Oh, okay. Do we have one copy we can give Ms. Vignola? Here.
Yeah, okay.
I will give you my copy, Mrs. Vignola. Why don't we suspend for 30 or a quick minute for Mrs. Vignola? To move to vote on this? I'm sensing actually, do we need a vote? Seems like everyone's in favor. Is that I'm sensing everyone's in favor? We don't need a recorded vote? Okay. We'll consider the amendment passed. Now, Mr. Souza, do you have something for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to piggyback on the amendment that Mrs. Block had put forward, I would suggest including the following words, which I believe is being distributed now, and to refer, I mean, basically Mrs. Block amended two items there, the loss of postal plus at least 8 hours. So we'll go to 8 hours instead of 12. If I were to continue reading forward, I would read as follows, that the committee invite the CEO of Canada Post, president of CPAA, and the Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement, as opposed to the Minister, so I would just add Deputy in front of Minister. And then I would add the following, that the committee establish a schedule for this study no later than February 28th, 2024. And then it reads that the committee produce a report and table it in the House, but I would continue to add before June 7th, 2024. And that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests a government response.
Thanks. The email has gone out to everyone in both official languages. I see Mrs. Vignola.
Oui, je cherchais le texte. Pour moi, ça me va. On est un comité.
Yes, I was looking for the text. It's fine with me. This is something that we've always wanted to do, is to be efficient in this committee. And I have the impression, please confirm or disinfirm this impression. I have the impression that we're limiting the witnesses rather than saying we will call all the witnesses that the committee wishes to have, and we're not saying that. So that gives the impression that we will meet only 3 people, whereas there are people's experiences that need to be heard, that deserve to be heard. So in Mr. Souza's motion, the sub-amendment, I would add a sub-amendment saying that after procurement, add a comma, and any witness which the committee would deem necessary to convene, so that we don't limit ourselves to only 3 witnesses, even if they're very important. There are certainly other people who would want to tell us within those 8 hours that we've allowed, wish to communicate their opinions that are just as important.
Very good point that it usually doesn't say and other appropriate witnesses. So we'll start a speaking list on Mrs. Binola's sub-amendment to the amendment. Or are we comfortable with the changes as she's suggested? Which seems to be just 1 comma, I think I heard, and changing that we can call other witnesses as deemed appropriate. Okay. I think I'll maybe, give me a couple seconds, maybe we'll just have the clerk read it back in so we know what we're... Would you, Madame, would you repeat?
Donc, après approvisionnement.
So after procurement, comma, as well as any witness that the committee will deem it necessary to convene.
Back? Okay. I'm sensing that we have approval for this. Wonderful. So amended, we're now just back to discussing the amended motion, which is Mr. Sousa's, but including other witnesses, basically. I have Ms. Vignola. Let's go ahead.
Très rapidement.
Very briefly, there's the same error in Mrs. Brock's amendment and Mr. Sousa's sub-amendment. At least 8 hours of evidence be devoted to. So there's a problem with the past participle. It's S-O-I-E-N-T rather than S-O-I-T, and consacré with a E-S added.
You're a teacher. I appreciate that. Our clerks will work on cleaning it up, and hopefully we'll have it ready for when hopefully we get to a point where we're ready to finalize Mr. Sousa's amendment. So we have Mrs. I guess I'll ask everyone's permission to allow the clerk to clean that up as Ms. Sousa suggested. Mrs. Vignola, sorry, I apologize. Mrs. Vignola suggested. Okay, we're now back to Mr. Members of Parliament in Alberta can perform wedding ceremonies, so I'll just let you know. We have that right. We're now back to the Mr. Sousa's amended amendment. Do we have anyone wish to speak on the Mr. Sousa's amended amendment? Are we all, sorry, Mrs. Blanc?
I think it's always appropriate to have a minister appear to speak to issues like this. So we on this side of the table would appreciate hearing from the minister on this issue. So we'd be happy to add the deputy minister to the list, but we would like to see the minister remain on that list.
Mr. Sousa?
Yeah, I appreciate the member opposite's desire to have the minister, as all of us would. I'm just trying to make certain that we have substantive value in the witnesses that come forward. We are going to have the minister appear on a number of occasions before us, and I want to make certain that we deal with the matter that is of prevalence here, and that is the executive and the CEO of the company determining how, in fact, they are operating. And the deputy minister, even the deputy minister will have some limitations in respect to those answers. So I'm just wondering to what extent the best use of his time will be here. And he'll just say, well, we'll refer to the CEO, we'll refer to the executive. It's arm's length. It's all those other things that's going to come out of it. We need to get to the bottom of it. We need to make sure that the issues that are prevalent, the strategy, and the board that oversees Canada Post are also held accountable to where we're going and how we're going forward. It is also in the minister's desire to get to the bottom of these very issues that Mr. I was going to say Bacharach. Is that how it's pronounced? Bacharach. I have a tendency of mispronouncing some of even my own colleagues, so don't feel slighted by it. So Mrs. Block, I appreciate your desire. I just would rather us save the minister for some more prevalent issues, and you will have him here, in which case you can ask him this issue as well as many other things when he appears before us. But again, I want to make good use of the time that we're having these deliberations and these witnesses and get get a more substantive response in terms of what comes forward.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence, and then Mr. Bacharach.
Yeah, I understand that, and certainly some of these questions will be technical in nature. But having been at numerous now committee meetings where we're looking into the actions of crown corporations and government departments, the trouble is you get to a certain point with a deputy minister and they say, and rightfully so, I am not political. I can't comment on that. And so I think it's absolutely critical if we're going to have a serious review of this to have the minister there in real time.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Bacharach?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this. I do think it's important to have the minister appear, and because ultimately the accountability sits on his desk and on his shoulders. However, there's a new minister responsible for Canada Post. Based on my meetings with the last minister responsible for Canada Post, I'm not convinced that Canada Post is the top priority. And I know, surprising. And so my preference would be to hear from witnesses throughout the course of the study and then decide near the end whether the minister should be invited separately to address the topics that have been raised. I think that allows us to survey the issue and decide which aspects of the issue are really the responsibility of the minister and which questions we want to ask. I've been part of other studies, and we have the minister appear at the first meeting, and the committee hasn't even really dug into the material and heard from the witnesses that are most affected. So that would be my preference. I think the deputy minister is going to have been with the department longer and is going to have more familiarity with the issues at hand. If we hear from the deputy near the beginning, and then when we get near the end of the study, decide whether it warrants having the minister appear, that would be my preference. And just speaking to the other parts of the amendment, I like the other parts because it allows us to get through this in a fairly timely way. Thank you.
Thanks. I have Mr. Lawrence and Mrs. Block.
Mrs. Block there.
Sure, Mrs. Block. Before we do, perhaps, well, actually, Mrs. Block and then Mr. Susan, then I'll suggest perhaps a compromise, something that we've done in the past at this committee with ministers, but go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Then what I'm hearing is there should be no reason to remove the minister from the list, just understanding that we will ask him to attend committee if we feel it's necessary and at a time when it suits him and maybe further down the road in the study. But I think we could still leave the minister on the list, understanding that.
Yeah, as I mentioned, he is willing to have these discussions. In fact, there are matters of concern as it relates to this file, and certainly the minister is interested, and he too is trying to come up to speed, being new, as Mr. Bachrach has just explained. But you do have a section that we just allowed to be put in, which is Mrs. Vignola's suggestion to put as other witnesses are required, and I think that would fall in this case. So I'm not trying to suggest that the minister doesn't want to appear. He just wants to be valued for when he comes. And I suspect he's also going to take great interest in the witnesses that do appear before us in regards to this, because it's a matter of concern, I think that is shared across Canada on many issues. And Canada Post does have matters that need to be addressed as a Crown corporation. And having overseen other Crown corporations in the past, I recognize some of the consequences that are entailed on the political side as being expressed, which is then beyond just the minister himself, because it is a substantive corporation that's been around for hundreds of years. It's also a matter of greater decisions made by the government of Canada as a whole. So I would suggest we leave it as it is. Give yourself the opportunity as other witnesses may be appropriate, which would then provide for the minister's engagement as well.
Thanks. Before we go to Mr. Joari, perhaps so we can move ahead with this, is we have in the past have had the ministers, when they do come for the estimates, to have an extended time. And I could hear Mr. Joari whispering, I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't steal my idea, but perhaps if we wish, we could do it where the next, well, we'll have the subs and then the mains that he commits to an extra. I think when we had last time around, they stayed for an extra 25-minute round or an extra 20-minute round. That perhaps we could have that as a kind of a compromise.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that's Mr. Joari, go up.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to say, with a little bit of caveat. Remember, we're going to have the minister here twice before actually we start this study, both on the main as well as the estimates, and if we want to, and as part of others. Once we got to a point that we have a pretty good understanding what the issues are and what the challenges are and what the strategies are, I think that's an appropriate time for us to call the minister to come in, so we can clearly say, this is what we heard. This is what that's what we understand. We understand these are the challenges. We also understand these are the recommendations that's been made to you. For example, okay, what is the government is going to do? Rather than coming in right off the bat and set probably the direction of, well, we are assessing it, we are valuing it, we are looking at it. So, so I definitely, the latter part of the process, definitely, and I think as part of other, that's already covered. That we could call other witnesses, including the minister. Ministers falls under other, and I'm saying before we get this study done, even to the last meeting, which we're going to call the minister, we're going to have opportunities to call the minister. Whether we're going to go to an extra round every time we have a minister coming in for 25 minutes and talk about specifically about Canada Post, I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you during those hours that the minister appears here and his staff or the department shows up here, we have an opportunity to ask any questions that we want, and we've done that in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shari. And at this point, we can certainly always add a motion to call the minister at any time we do choose. Mr. Sousa.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get clarity here. The way the motion's been amended allows for the minister to come at our discretion. He's going to be here for estimates and other matters. I'm not certain it's required for us to extend his stay as a result of those issues. I would leave it as is and proceed forward, Mr. Chair.
Anyone wish to?
At the risk of belaboring this, Mr. Chair, I'll give
No,
it a shot.
there is no rescue.
I think the compromise that our chair was proposing was that instead of squabbling over whether or not the minister is included in the motion, that we invite him to appear for an extra 20 minutes when he appears for estimates, and that we dedicate a portion of our questioning of him to this specific topic and include his answers in the body of the report. That would be my my understanding of what was proposed, and maybe we don't come to a consensus compromise, and in which case I think I will, because I like the timeline that's laid out here, I'm not going to vote against the amendment the Liberals have put forward, but I would expect that near the end of the study we will invite the minister to answer our questions about Canada Post.
Thanks. It's Mr. Shawari, then Mrs. Vignola.
So I'll go back to the same point. If when the minister shows up for the estimates in Maine, and we haven't even got halfway through this study, we're going to put the minister, and we're going to get the same answers we would have got if we had the minister there tomorrow. So by specifically calling half an hour or one round of question, 25 minutes or 24 minutes, asking a minister questions where we haven't done the study is not going to be the right thing to do.
Mrs. Vignola, and then Mr. Lawrence.
Personally, I find that to ask the minister to come, we can have them come for the main estimates and the supplementary estimates. This proposal of 25 minutes, my colleague has said that we will be maybe halfway through the current study that's being requested. That should be taken into account. But if we're having the minister come for the estimates and then making the minister come back for Canada Post, that's 2 hours rather than an hour and a half. So if we haven't gotten very far with the study, the presence of the minister will be have someone say, this is a Crown corporation that's completely independent of the government, so we risk not obtaining an answer. And I know that ministers' time is precious, and I would like that be taken into account. It's part of their duties to come and testify here, but if they're coming for 2 hours and we add more hours, could we make the use of their time as efficient as possible? If there's an hour to be added, that would be an hour and a half rather than an hour. They will have saved some time, so that should be taken into account. So to take into account the possibility of having them come at the same time for another subject. So for half an hour rather than adding another hour, which is reasonable to my mind and a completely acceptable compromise.
This block.
I'm good.
Oh, we're ready to go to, is your hand up, Mr. Baines? Oh, okay. Do you need us to read it back in where we're sitting at with Mrs. Amendment or Mrs. Vignola's? Okay.
Yeah, please read it.
Yeah. Do you want to just read it out or hand me the computer? Huh? Okay, le comité entrepreneur, and no, I'll go into English, that the committee undertake a study on the sustainability of postal service in Canada's rural and remote communities, that a minimum of 12 hours of witness testimony be dedicated to the topic, that the committee invite the CEO of Canada Post. Yes, sir?
If the wording around loss was missed in what you just read into the record.
Sorry. Oh. No, so I do not have the.
It's all good.
Oh, I know. We will, yes. Sorry. Our clerk's going to update it. Thank you, Ms. Bachrach. Let's try again. That the committee undertake a study on the loss of postal service in Canada's rural and remote communities, that at least 8 hours of witness testimony be dedicated to the topic, that the committee invite the CEO of Canada Post, President of CPAA, the Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement, comma, and any other witnesses the committee deems necessary. That the committee establish a schedule for this study no later than February 28th, 2024, that the committee produce a report and table in the House before June 7th, 2024, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee request a government response. Seem fine with that? Thumbs up? Wonderful. So passed. Mr. Bachrach, thank you. Mrs. Block, thank you. Mrs. Vignola, thank you for your corrections. And Mr. Sousa, thank you for the amendment. And thank you for providing it in French. I'm sorry, did I?
In both official languages.
Yeah.
Just saying
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
We are now on to RiveCan. Mr. Lafleur, sorry, 2 seconds. Yeah, so just shut up. Go ahead.
My apologies. Yeah, we on the side of the House would like to dismiss the witness.
That's not the proper format.
Dismiss the mistress in the proper format. I'd like to move a motion to dismiss the witness.
Okay, as such, that becomes a debatable motion, Mr. Sousa. So we'll take a speaking list. Mr. Brock, Mr. Shawari, Ms. Block, Mr. Sousa. Mr. Brock, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm rather surprised at Mr. Sousa's suggestion that we relieve the witness, maybe because, without explanation from him, maybe because of the hour. It's 20 to 6. This meeting was supposed to start at 3:30. I would have thought, though, that there had been some communication to the witness that our votes, 7 votes in fact, delayed the start of this particular meeting. I would have hoped as well that there would have been some communication to the witness in advance of today's date, that he was not expected to provide any testimony and answer any questions right at the start of the meeting because of committee business. There's no indication as to how long that committee business would have taken, but I believe the witness had committed himself to 1 further hour of Q&A. These are relevant issues with this particular witness. We did not finish the full 2-hour allotment that we had because of numerous points of order and discussions with respect to material that was not in the possession of regular members of this committee. That has since been rectified, as I understand it. They've had well over 24 hours to receive the material. We are ready to proceed, and unless Mr. Souza provides some justifiable reason why this witness ought to be excused, I would suggest that we have the witness here, and if he's able to stay for the 1 full hour, we use that time accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jory, please.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank Mr. Lafleur for choosing to come back. I had an opportunity to read the preliminary statement of facts for both Mr. Cameron MacDonald as well as Mr. Antonio Utano. I am actually flabbergasted by the fact that, given what's in here and the fact that the investigation is still going on by RCMP, the internal investigation is still going on. The AG hasn't finalized her report. That we somehow, and I'm trying to find the right word, we somehow thought it would be a good idea, and I was part of the group that voted to have Sir Lafleur here and have this document made available to us. But it wasn't before that I had this document read. And that's where I'm going to stop, because if I start getting into the level of detail of content that's available here, and the investigation is not completed, and we even, through limiting our question to the process and general, we could lead a conversation such a way that would force Mr. Lafleur to make statements that one could deduce certain conclusion that it is very, very, very risky. We saw almost half an hour after our last meeting, we received a communication from certain legal bodies that we should be very careful about what information do we share about this report and what this report is all about and the role that each one of the witnesses, etc., are playing. And this came almost before we even got an email which gave us the link into these documents. These documents, by the way, were made available in hard copy to the Office of the Clerk on January 29th.
In both languages.
In both official languages. For some reason, it sat. Had I had the opportunity to read this document, I would have moved the motion to dismiss the witness. And I would not support any other activities on ArriveCan and Butler AI investigation or committee or calling any witnesses whatsoever going forward until all those processes are complete. Because what we're doing a disservice to justice. And I'm being very, very serious about this. Very serious. I'm not a lawyer, okay? But what I read, it's scary. I love to see the report from AG. I love, more than that, I love to see the report from RCMP. Because I think there is a big difference between the work that RCMP is doing and the work that Mr. Lafleur is doing, okay, from an administrative, whereas versus legal and corruption and all of those things. And this is, getting more witnesses here and asking questions in the middle of investigation where this is just a preliminary statement of fact, that is concerning. Even media picked it up. And Global Mail, a Global Mail, which is basically, I'll stop there. They are now looking and they're saying is, at least the way I understand it or the way I read it, is should we go down this path? And why are we really doing this? I wouldn't want it. Just put yourself in a position, even on the people who these reports were prepared for. This investigation is going around. Like I don't want to be in any court until all those processes are gone through, and we're turning this committee into a quasi-judicial process. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm here to ask certain questions. And if this is just a sample, and I read it again, preliminary statement of fact, and this is not from a lawyer, this is from internal investigation. I really like to read the preliminary statement of fact from RCMP. So the reason we are dismissing, we are asking the witness to be dismissed because I don't think it's unfair to the process. I don't think it's fair to the Mr. Lafleur to be put in this position while this investigation is still going on. As soon as the investigation, all of those are completed, I'll be the first one to vote Mr. Lafleur coming back. And I want to go back on the record again saying CBSA, through Mr. Lafleur, offered to come to this committee in camera, MPs only, and walk us through this report. And I wish I had the wisdom to accept that at that time. We chose not to because I thought, oh my God, there's some sort of conspiracy going on. We were given that opportunity. Now, having that opportunity to just read this, I don't even want to ask a question where I had that opportunity before. Had we had Mr. Lafleur coming into this committee and in camera, allow us to ask questions. That's why, on my behalf, I am strongly opposing any other committee meetings as it relates to RFCAN until all those milestones are completed. We've had a report. We've had the opportunity to look at the report and then call all the witnesses back. I want everybody back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jouari. I have Mr. Souza, then I have Mrs. Vignola, then Mr. Brock.
As my colleague has expressed, and we all are very concerned about the tone and a situation that's occurred recently in this committee as it relates specifically to Mr. Lafleur. We recognize that the committee requested a statement of fact. It was sent in both languages at an appropriate time back in January 29th. At that point, Mr. Lafleur was not on the docket. He was one of the considered members, one of the considered witnesses that was supposed to come forward. During that time,
I'm going to interrupt there. That's not correct. We actually agreed to have him before.
but we hadn't yet stated the date.
No, but we
Right.
had.
Okay, so that's my point.
Sorry.
So we hadn't stated the date as to when he was supposed to appear. He was one of the witnesses that we want to see. So now we have the statement of fact before us, not before us, before the clerk in both languages prior. That then became known that then the witness was called, knowing that the statement of fact was in hand, which would have been advantageous to the committee members to have an opportunity to review, to then put forward appropriate questions and understanding. Furthermore, there were many occasions when those that are proceeding over the investigation had called for an in-camera meeting because of the confidentiality measures, not to make this a public kangaroo court. There's a lot of people here trying to play Perry Mason, or maybe it's Tom Cruise. Regardless, what we have here is folks that are being the witnesses that are being alleged with wrongdoing, those very witnesses are now going through an investigation which appears to be contrary to what was initially put forward by the opposition. And my worry is, here's a statement of fact that was provided to the clerk. Somehow another member of the committee has taken it upon himself to approach the witnesses, approach the very individuals that we are deliberating over. And the concern that many are facing is the obstruction that's being put forward, the confidentiality matters that are being pertained, which even the chair has explained are highly confidential, and yet it's being made public and questions are being made to you as the witness that deliberates over the very issue that is meant to be confidential to protect those very witnesses and the integrity of the investigation. So there's a couple of things, concerns. One, there seems to be an obstruction that's being taken on the investigation. There seems to be an interference with the witnesses in terms of its transparency, and I'm no lawyer, but those that are, it would seem to me that's inappropriate for this committee to go on their own and start to talk to witnesses and go after individuals when they're being investigated. And then we have legal responses coming to us by those witnesses. Part of it because they're being approached by other members, by their own admission that have gone over these to witnesses. That seems completely inappropriate. And then there are individuals that have access to this confidential information. Now, they apparently didn't share it with the chair. They didn't share it with their own colleagues. They just decided on their own that we're going to do this in secret. And only at the time of this committee hearing where you appeared before us, having already had a statement of claim in hand by the clerk, not having it shared with the committee members, which would have been appropriate for us to ask questions of you. So that unilateral decision to call upon you to become a witness, knowing that you have a statement of fact and relevant information that would be appropriate and important for us to know, maybe it wouldn't have been called. Maybe you would not have been called to this committee because we would have seen in that reflection how confidential and how inappropriate it would be to have a public discussion on this with you. So it should have been in camera, as was already suggested many times by many others, to protect the substance and the integrity of the investigation. So now you're called back. Now we're being asked to continue the deliberations over these confidential matters, which lawyers from the witnesses are saying don't do it, which folks from the CBA and those that are overseeing the investigation are saying be cautious, you're going to compromise the report. We have the Auditor General doing a review. You've shared information with RCMP, which are acting on their own. They're not advising you. They're not coming forward with this issue. And we don't know what deliberations are being had with the witnesses. We do know from reading the statement of fact, I went through it very, very, very thoroughly. And I do see that there was reach out to the witnesses. Notwithstanding what was said, the report does make reference that the witnesses were both sought after to respond to enable that witness to make affirmations or refute some of the items, but then they take legal response, and rightly so. They got legal representation as is appropriate. What's not appropriate is for us around this room to play lawyers, to be doing this as a prosecution ring, to be in the means by which to put you and others at risk, and then compromise the very investigation that's being put forward. Let the people do their job, and then if we do have an opportunity to have you back, I think it's appropriate that those other members, I know, having spoken to them, not everyone has had an opportunity to review the statement of fact. Not everyone's had an opportunity to see exactly what is in this report. And the fact that too few members on this committee have had an opportunity to see it, that it has not been shared with staff, which has been decided, then we need time for them to come up to speed as to what's being said, to then appropriately ask you the questions, and do so not in public, to protect the interests of the witnesses and the integrity of the investigation. That's it, Mr. Speaker.
Please wait till when you have the floor, please. Mrs. Vignola?
we should never forget that we are not investigators. We are not a court of justice. We cannot and we must not substitute ourselves to an investigator for a court of justice. The only thing that Mr. Lafleur can speak to us about is the process. However, I realize with what I've read, with the reflection that followed Mr. Lafleur's arrival on Monday, I've realized that the questions that we ask can interfere with the process not only of internal investigation, but of the RCMP investigation. And you know to what degree I like to find the truth. I like to seek it out. I like to know it. I like to understand in order to be able to find some lines of thinking, some possible solutions. And I don't want to bring a slogan that's overused, but that make sense. That and I agree to say that we should re-invite Mr. Lafleur, but once the investigations, both the internal one and the RCMP investigation, are completed, in order to not interfere, even in an indirect way, with what's happening currently, because that's important. It's important that it remain as impartial as possible. It's important that people can go to the end of the questions, and that any person involved in these matters that we're studying currently be addressed and subjected to the consequences. I have formulated an opinion for myself at this point, and that opinion should not interfere with the current investigations. There's no black and white here. We're really in a gray zone constantly. There aren't just three people who are involved. I'm convinced of that. But the investigations have to be carried out properly. And what I've said here should not have any effect in the investigations, because I'm not an investigator, and we are not investigators. We're not a court of justice. We're here to find out what did not work in a process so that we can find solutions to improve the process and ensure that the taxes of people, of Québécois and Canadians, be used in a rational and intelligent way. And that's why now I agree that we allow Mr. Lafleur to leave today and that we invite him back once all these investigations are over to understand what happened in detail and to ensure, as we're mandated to do, that the process will be duly changed, duly improved, and that we won't be having long-term loss of the taxes of our citizens. So there's a motion asking that we can dismiss Mr. Lafleur today and that he would come back later once the investigations have been completed. That's what's the logical thing, that what the right thing to do is today, even though I'm not happy with that. Even if we have 15,000 questions, we want to go right to the bottom of the barrel to try and get every little fragment of an answer, everything in due time. Patience is a virtue. We don't all possess it all the time. And now it's the time to have it. We also have to take time. It's not as though we have just 10 pages to read in the ArriveCAN documents we've received. There's several thousand pages. I have 2,000 that I've read so far. And I think I've just got the tiny little tip at the tip of the iceberg. So that's my opinion, and I agree that we could dismiss Mr. Lafleur with a view of having him come back once the investigations are over. Thank you.
Sorry, I have several ahead of you, Mr. Backrack. Oh, certainly. Ms. Kusi?
Yeah, I'll pass my time for now. Thank you.
Mr. Brock?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to my colleagues. And while I have a lengthy response that I could provide based on the comments I heard from Mr. Jawari and Mr. Souza, particularly from Mr. Souza, without identifying myself, he certainly made specific reference to the strategy that I adopted and the evidence that I relied upon. He certainly impugned my integrity and character. And although he has parliamentary privilege within this committee, he certainly does not have it outside of this committee and outside of this House. These are serious allegations that he's leveled against me. He used the phrase obstruction and interference with witnesses. Mr. Souza, I don't believe, has a law degree. I do, as my colleague Mr. Lawrence does. He certainly does not appreciate the rules of evidence. He certainly does not appreciate the rules with respect to talking to witnesses. And as I shared with the committee on our last occasion, there is absolutely no proprietary interest in any witnesses. That is, witnesses called on behalf of the Conservative team, witnesses called on behalf of the Liberal team, the Bloc team, the NDP team. These witnesses did not have to speak with me. They chose to speak with me. They were not under duress to speak with me. They could have refused to answer any and all questions that I put to them. In much the same fashion that Mr. Lafleur cautioned this committee in his opening statement that he was here to talk about process, but notwithstanding that opening statement, he indeed answered questions. Sometimes it took me a number of times to rephrase the question, but eventually I got answers. So to answer Mr. Jawari's point, why are we doing this? I think that's abundantly clear. This is about unearthing the truth behind the wasteful spending of the $54 million ArriveCAN app, of which 11 million went to a two-person firm who's currently under RCMP criminal investigation for doing absolutely nothing, acting as the middleman between the CBSA and the real IT professionals, some of which legitimately did work, some of which did nothing and were still paid. The procurement ombudsman called that bait and switch. These are horrendous allegations against the government of Canada. So I can see, Mr. Chair, why the Liberals will do everything in their power to shut this down. Because I have chased this particular scandal over the last several months in a number of committees, and I've been faced with tactics similar to what we heard today, with motions to adjourn to silence me. I won't be silenced. Mr. Baines can laugh all he wants, but that's the truth. That's my job as a parliamentarian. And with my criminal law background and my prosecutorial background, that's how I frame my questions. I'm not Perry Mason. I wish I looked like Tom Cruise, but I don't. I thank Mr. Souza for making that suggestion. And my wife might appreciate that in hindsight. But that's why we're here, Mr. Chair, is to get to the bottom of this scam. And in particular, GC Strategies, which just seems to be kryptonite in the hands of the government. Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, even said in the House that it was completely illogical, the procurement activities surrounding the awarding of this contract to GC Strategies to funnel out $54 million. If the Prime Minister has concerns, then why do not all parliamentarians have concerns? Yes, this is not a court of law. This isn't a criminal court. It's not a civil court. But Mr. Lafleur is certainly within his purview to say, yes, Mr. Brock, it's a relevant question, but it might compromise my ability to continue the investigation by answering. He never did to any of the questions I put to him or any of the questions any member put to him on the last occasion. So with all due respect to my colleagues, and in particular Ms. Vignola, who I greatly admire, I don't see how continuing with this particular witness in terms of getting some basic questions answered is going to compromise the ability for anyone to defend themselves. Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano both have very experienced counsel working on their behalf. As I suggested to Mr. Lafleur on the last occasion, there is an application in Superior Court with respect to reasserting and preserving, their legal status and their privilege to make sure that they are in a position to participate in Mr. Lafleur's investigation. They've never refused. I know that there has been an exchange of correspondence between Mr. Lafleur and counsel as early as today, as a matter of fact. And I know that there are certain conditions that counsel wants to see established before his clients participate. And let's not forget something here, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Shari?
I think that statement just proves the fact.
That's not a point of order.
Yeah,
That's
it's not
debate.
a point of order. You can discuss
You
it.
just revealed the
Get
stuff
on the
that's in
speaking
here.
list.
That's not right.
Get on the speaking list.
I am on the
You
speaking list,
can-
and I'm going to talk about
You
it.
can attend to it then. Mr. Brock, continue.
Lost my train of thought there. Yeah, ad hominem attacks. Thank you. Thank you. Ad hominem attacks are not appropriate. It's unbecoming and it's not parliamentary. So thank you for your apology. I'm doing my job, Mr. Jawari.
I believe that you are doing.
Thank you. So that being said, Chair, I believe the will of the committee is to relieve Mr. Lafleur at this time. Do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Is Mr. Lawrence next on the list?
Am I next or no? I asked. Okay. Must be all good, Cal.
Mr. Brock is speaking.
Go ahead.
Mr. Jawari, then Mr. Lawrence,
Yeah.
then Mr. Backrack, then Mrs. Block.
So as I indicated, Mr. Chair, I believe the will of this committee is to relieve Mr. Lafleur of his responsibilities today. I take into consideration greatly the suggestion of Ms. Vignola. We're not saying never. We're just saying not now. We don't know how long this investigation is going to take. We're approaching 2 years since the date that the CBSA received the Bottler AI complaint. We've received no update at all from the RCMP, and we don't know ultimately if the investigation internally by the CBSA or the RCMP are going to focus on other individuals. As I suggested to Mr. Lafleur, which he disagreed with, Mr. Mindone needs to be criminally investigated. There is a serious allegation of deleting 4 years of relevant emails by a person who held the title of vice president, who is now Canada's chief information officer. If there's anyone who should know how to preserve their IT and emails, it would be Mr. Doan. Mr. Doan appears to be the only one at the CBSA that had a problem with his emails. That's suspicious. And notwithstanding what Mr. Lafleur said, I'm really glad we were not in camera, to Mr. Souza's point, but rather public, because I hope the RCMP investigator, whoever that was following this. Because there is a strong suggestion that the breadth of those involved in this scam needs to be expanded. We've got serious concerns about Mr. Doan. I've got serious concerns about Aaron O'Gorman, the president of the CBSA, who deliberately misled this committee. Not once, at least 2 occasions, deliberately withheld information from this committee. And although witnesses are never, well, I shouldn't say never, but rarely sworn to tell the truth, there is a presumption that when witnesses attend a committee, they are presumed to be telling the truth and nothing but the truth. So help them God, or however it binds their conscience. So I leave with that notion, sir, that this investigation has the potential to be expanded, that there's more individuals involved than simply Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano. Bearing in mind the will of the committee, I'm asking for a vote. I'm moving for a vote.
I think so. It was originally from Mr. Souza to a vote to dismiss Mr. Lafleur. We've had several people talk on it. Can we get to that? And we can move to the committee business on other issues?
Don't we have to exhaust the speaking?
Well, if everyone wishes to pass, there seemed to be a will to do this, but we can go to the speaking list. That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
No, it is.
I'd like to.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to continue the speaking list, but it appears we wish to continue.
Yeah.
So after Mr. Brock is Mr. Jarari, then Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Backrack, Mrs. Kusi, Mr. Souza, and then Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And best pivot of ever I've seen. So I commend you, my colleague, Mr. Brock, for doing such a great pivot and talking about and linking it to ArriveCAN, which is really not which is the scope of this study, but it doesn't have anything to do with why we have this witness called here, and linking it somehow to the federal government and somehow to the Prime Minister and all of those things. Great pivot. Even now, and I hope really the media is watching and the Canadians are watching, because they could see what this ArriveCAN supposed study is all about. Now, I am specifically asking, and our side is specifically supporting, asking the committee to excuse Mr. Lafleur, is because in my belief, and I believe in our side, if we actually continue with this, we are justifying what happened in the last meeting and the process that we went through. The approach we took was wrong. By having this meeting today, by putting Mr. Lafleur and asking process question, and by continuing along some of the line of comments that we got from Mr. Brock, which is directly from this report, and just wanted to know which part. It is actually on page 5 of 71 of Mr. McDonald report. Okay? This is not right. We cannot, until this study is done, we cannot talk about the fact that potentially some of the witnesses have chosen not to speak who participated in an investigation. You just revealed that, sir. You just revealed that. Yes, you did. Go back to the Hansard and read it, and that's wrong. So, we should not continue with this process. I think we're getting to the vote, but the reason we shouldn't do is because this, by doing this on our side, will help justify the wrongdoing and the approach that was taken. That's number one. Number two, we agreed to do a RiveCan study. And continue doing the RiveCan study. We have basically paused 10 studies, and I can name them. We have agreed to pause 10 studies. This committee hasn't done anything, hasn't delivered one iota of output for the last 4 months, because we also thought that it is important for us to look at the RiveCan. And the more we dig, the more we realize there is no ticking bomb. However, Butler AI, it's a different story. Therefore, under the umbrella of ArriveCan, which are conservative counterparts trying to keep alive because they build a narrative around it and they're sinking every day, bring Butler AI. Fine, we brought Butler AI. Now we are saying, oh my God, based on this is even going deeper than we expected. So it's not that we don't want to do the study or we're trying to hide something or we are trying to protect the government or trying to protect the over a so-called $54 million application. And I'm not going to go down that road again. So the fact that we are accused of wanting to stop this study and block all of those things, it's not true. Our behavior hasn't demonstrated that. We've been active participant on every committee. We have accepted the new curriculum and the new plan, even after the subcommittee voted on doing other stuff. We've given the chair the leverage to be able to call witnesses as it relates to ArriveCan. We haven't come back one time and said, oh, we agreed on this plan, we agreed on this calendar, so how come we are not doing? We said, oh, fair enough, there's new evidence, let's follow. So the notion that our conservative sides are trying to portray that we are trying to hide something or blocking evidence or pushing this under the rug is absolutely false. I challenge all Canadians, and if you want, call my office. I'll pull the list of the number of committees meetings that we've had on ArriveCan, the number of witnesses that we've called. And what have we shown? Nothing but a bunch of clips, 5-minute clips on social media of members that now even the media is saying, oh my God, and I'll quote what they're saying, just because everybody else quote media. And by the way, I'm not answering to any questions to media after this. Okay, so don't bother coming and asking. Okay. Okay, so what they're saying on ArriveCan, conservatives switch from prosecution to defense, and let's talk about that. So, if we don't stop this process, it could be perceived. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a trained, so I'm trying to be very careful about my word. So I'm not, I'm not putting anybody's in any position of wrongdoing. So if we don't stop this, what we could be perceived is that we had access to information. This information didn't line up with perceived strategy. And then we said, well, who's providing this? Oh, CBSA through Mr. Lafleur. So let's call the witness. And I'm saying it could be perceived. It could be perceived as such. Let's call Mr. Lafleur and let's challenge him, and let's challenge the credibility of the investigation before it gets out. And that's a wrong perception, because that's not the job of this committee. And I don't think any member in this committee ever would do something like that. But that's a perception that could be derived by those who are watching and potentially by media. Oh, if they're coming back and they're saying you're switching from prosecutor to whatever it is now, prosecutor to defense, could they tomorrow they come and say, well, that's a perception? I don't want that. I don't want the media having that perception. Now, we are talking about as if we were going to shut down this ArriveCan study. No, I don't want to shut down the ArriveCan study or Butler AI investigation. Because if after 5 months of us doing our so-called investigative work, we have not been able to come up with one iota aside from a couple of wrongdoings, which is serious of nature, I agree, which hopefully would lead into process changes and new regulation around multi-levels of contracting, around using standards for resumes and all of those. There's no bombshell here. There's a lot of wrongdoing, but this wrongdoing seems to be, in certain cases, it's been there for a long time, and it's time for it to be highlighted. So by no means our side is saying stop ArriveCan. What we are suggesting is pause. Let's pick one of the other 10 studies now, potentially 11 studies, and we have a couple of motions, 12 studies, to be able to talk about something that we can at least put one output before end of June out of this committee after about a year and a half. Shipbuilding strategy, air defense strategy, ArriveCan, outsourcing, name it. Canada Post. We haven't done anything but ArriveCan, and we've been supported. We've been willing partner. Therefore, it's not fair to say we are trying to push things under the rug. So we will go back to ArriveCan. We will call witnesses, but I am adamant about the fact that every time until the studies have been completed and the AG report is out and our CMP report is completely out, and we've had ample time to read. Every time there is a motion to bring a witness resident ArriveCan, I am going to move a motion to dismiss that witness until all of those is done, because we're interfering in the wrong way in this investigation that's being done, whether administrative. Okay? And if I wanted to debut some of the comments that my colleague, Mr. Brock, made, I have to refer to some of the content of this, at least this 71-page document, which I hope you guys read. And if I have to use words in here to debut those comments, then I'm going to run the risk of opening up the line of questioning in such a way that will reveal what's in this content of this report is. And that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. So, continuing with this is justification of a wrongdoing in our approach. We've agreed on a plan for ArriveCan. We've been supportive all along. We push everything else out. We will continue on this report when everything is out and all the witnesses will be called. I don't know what the strategy is, okay? Why Conservative has changed their position and why we are trying to go down the path of potentially perceived concept of discrediting a witness who's leading an internal investigation. And if we want to continue on answering some of the some of the line of comments that our colleagues on the other side are raising. This will go and open up this, and that's not the right time to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Joari. Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, and I'll be fairly brief. In fact, I'll point out the irony of us calling for a vote which will, as I can count, will dismiss the witness, and the Liberals won't let us because they want to continue to filibuster, which is a little bit different strategy. But the part about this Liberal government that has been consistent is their scandals. Perhaps we haven't seen anything in Ontario like this since the Wynne-McGuinty government of scandal after scandal after scandal. And we've seen consistent behavior, right, from Wynne-McGuinty to Trudeau, which is cover up, cover up, cover up. But it also provides us with a precedent. So, SNC-Lavalin, did the committee cease investigating it prior to the RCMP?
Nope.
No. We Charity, did the committee stop studying it prior
Chair,
to
point of order,
the
just,
RCMP?
what is the relevance here to this?
That's not a point of order.
Discussion.
Not a point of order. It's disrespectful.
I'll address that. Question on relevance, I consider it fully relevant. Continue, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you.
We'll get to it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we see in We Charity that once again, and there is absolutely nothing wrong. OGGO, did we stop, did the committee stop investigating it before the ethics commissioner? The groping allegations, would that stop a committee from investigating it? Absolutely not. The precedent is clear. We have the authority and we have the right. We are a committee at the federal government parliament, and we have the right, not only the right, we have the obligation. In fact, it's an abdication of duty not to study this significant scandal. And we will see this government, I'll give you a prediction, Mr. Chair. We'll see continued filibuster and avoidance because they want to avoid this, and that's called a cover-up. Thank you.
Well done, Philip. Well done.
Mr. Bachrach, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've only been on this committee for, I think, 3 meetings now, but I must say it's been a somewhat bizarre experience.
It's not bizarre.
I hope it's not me. I hope the things weren't going along perfectly smoothly until I showed up. But I was listening to Mr. Brock's vociferous objection to this motion we have in front of us, and I listened for the first few minutes, and I think I got the gist of where he was going with it, and then I admit I lost focus and started doing something else on my phone for a brief moment, and I missed the road to Damascus moment, this turning point, when all of a sudden the play shifted from one end of the ice to the other. And anyway, it seems to be kind of one of the themes that I've picked up in this study, is that things change very quickly in terms of where people are coming from. I agree with the spirit of this motion. I think everyone wants to get to the bottom of what happened. I've read through the statement of fact, the preliminary statement of fact, and I don't think that it would be compromising the investigation to say that what I read I found deeply troubling. And I think most Canadians, if they read the statement of fact, would be deeply troubled by what seems to have gone on. But I'm concerned that if we were to continue down this line of questioning of Mr. Lafleur, as was occurring at the last meeting when some of the contents of the preliminary statement of fact were disclosed, that we would compromise the investigation. And I think what most Canadians would want is a full, impartial, objective investigation by the proper authorities that have access to all the information, that gets to the bottom of what went on, holds those people, if there is misconduct, if there is wrongdoing, if there is criminality, that the people responsible for that are held to account for their actions. And the best way that we can do that is by letting those authorities continue with their investigation. No one is questioning whether this committee has the right to continue down this path. Obviously, we do. The rights of committees.
Not you, Taylor.
Phil, man, I'm just getting started. Committees have tremendous latitude to investigate what they see fit and to compel evidence and to produce documents and that sort of thing. But I find myself in violent agreement with everyone around the table all of a sudden that we should dismiss the witness. And I thank Mr. Lafleur for returning to committee and spending the last hour or so with us. I hope that the investigation takes place in a timely way and that we're able to get the answers to the questions that Canadians have about what has taken place. And I do believe that after those investigations have concluded, both the internal investigation by CBSA and the RCMP's investigation, that perhaps that would be a more appropriate time for this committee to bring witnesses back when we have documentation, when we have reports in front of us, and ask further questions about where we go from there. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting in support of the motion. And again, I thank you for your forbearance.
Great. I have Mrs. Kusi, then Mr. Souza, then Mr. Genois.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it is not a surprise to me at all that the government has asked to dismiss the witness because of the embarrassment of this entire scandal. $54 million for an application, $11 million paid to two individuals working in their basements. Just consistent mismanagement that we have seen from this government. So, of course, they're going to do their best to shut it down at every single step of the way. And, of course, they are going to have their coalition partner, the NDP, help them to shut down this investigation every single step of the way, including having Mr. Lafleur here today, Mr. Chair. So this is not a surprise to me at all. And as well, I worry very much about the precedents that we are setting in this committee, Mr. Chair. You know, we previously had
Let me interrupt. Colleagues, please, can we end the chatter back and forth? And I will say that for both sides, please.
Yeah,
Show
thank you
the
very much,
respect for
Mr.
Mrs.
Chair.
Kusi.
I appreciate that. I know on the Liberal benches, they're used to their leaders shutting women down. And so, you know, they do what they see, and they're attempting to do that here as well. So as I said, the precedent of that we've seen within this committee of witnesses canceling as a result of, or not being able to show up as a result of medical notes, that what we've come to term on this side of the committee bench as the arrive can flu, very, very unfortunately. And now we have another negative precedent being set here today, that the dismissal of witnesses that have been called to this committee. And in fact, one member of this committee who has said that from now on, they will move to dismiss every single witness that is brought to this committee on arrive can. Well, they're going to be wasting a lot of time dismissing witnesses, and we're going to spend a lot of time going through this process again and again, which will only lead further to the frustration of Canadians and to evidence of the cover-up that is going on here. It's very clear. And, you know, I would also like to say that we, on this side, Mr. Chair, we follow the evidence where it leads us. And where it has led us here today is an issue that was brought to light on Monday, which I and my Conservative colleagues have been mentioning all week within the House, and that is that this government is investigating itself. And that, in fact, Mr. Lafleur reports to Ms. O'Gorman, who, as my colleague Mr. Brock pointed out, has been untruthful to this committee more than once. But I've got bad news for the government, because on Monday, the Auditor General releases her report. And guess what? The Auditor General doesn't report to CBSA or to Ms. O'Gorman. And so even if the government wants this to go away, it's not going to go away, because Ms. O'Gorman didn't even have the decency to inform the Auditor General of the RCMP investigation. That's an important piece of information here. So it is no surprise to me, Mr. Chair, that this government is attempting to dismiss this witness along with their coalition partner. I'm very concerned, as I said, about the precedents that we have set within this committee. And again, we follow the evidence where it leads us, and it leads us to a government investigating themselves. And it's not going to get any better on Monday when the Auditor General releases her report, and there'll be even more questions. And Canadians will demand that we get answers. This might not be a courtroom, but it is a place where we are accountable to Canadians and finding out the truth for Canadians. And as I said, you might want this to go away. This isn't going away. Because after all of this time, we have hardly any answers, because your government created such a mess with procurement. Your government created such a mess with ethical issues, again, starting from the top. And so you might want this to go away on the other side of the table here, but it is not going away. And it will continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. We'll go to Mr. Souza, but before we do, I'm going to remind both sides, please, to keep it down and allow the person who has the floor to continue.
Thank you,
So that
Mr.
goes
Chair.
for both sides.
I
Go
think-
ahead, Mr. Souza.
Thank you. I think Mr. Brock and Ms. Cusey have just reaffirmed why it's inappropriate to have this witness at this point. There's a number of allegations that are made. There's a number of attempts to discredit various individuals consensually. There's a number of efforts that are taken that sounds like it's a lynching that seems to be happening around this room. And that is inappropriate given the investigation that's underway. And the RCMP have been provided the information to do their own investigation as they see fit. To the point made, the Auditor General will come out on Monday with her report as well. So when it comes to the truth and the myths, truths that seem to be rampant around this room over the number of 5-6 months that we've been talking about ArriveCan, doesn't sound like we're trying to cover anything up. We're actually having open discussions about it, and we're encouraging those discussions because we too want to come to ensure that the activities of government are done appropriately. And to that end, Mr. Brock referenced the fact that people were getting paid for work they did not do. Well, that's not what the Ombudsman said. The Ombudsman said that no work was paid for work that work was done. Regardless of a bait or switch, there was a number of references made to it, which, by the way, is a practice that was also evident throughout the Conservative time in government. It's evident throughout industry and other sectors of the economy and the world, where they take on contracts and then they move those contracts to do other work as they see relevant. So no one got paid for work they did not do. So I want that very clear, and the Ombudsman made that true as well. And the issue with Christian Firth, and the member opposite talked about this terrible engagement that's been happening recently. Well, that too is not true. The fact of the matter is Christian Firth has been someone who's been dealing in procurement under the Conservative regime as well, under a different name. And that's been ongoing for some time. So as I said, the very effort that was just heard, the deliberations and the release of confidentiality that Mr. Brock admitted in his speaking engagement brings light to the fact that we have to take a pause and to protect the very interests. It seems like people are tampering because they have some kind of authority or knowledge or they desire that they want to do something beyond what they're doing in this House. They want to go further. That's certainly a prerogative. But when you put at risk the deliberations and the investigation, and now you try to discredit the investigator, you discredit the witnesses, now you're discrediting the investigator, we're never going to get to the conclusion. And thankfully, we are going to have a conclusion. Thankfully, there are a number of people that have all the facts. There is individuals that are reviewing this thing in its wholesome realm. They're not looking at one point in time. They're certainly not taking a political lens to it or being partisan about the issue or trying to get political points or video points or clips on their Facebooks or whatever it is they're doing with it. We need to take action to protect the integrity of the investigation and the results that come from it. And this is why we need to ensure that there's some neutrality in the approach that's taken. This committee is not being at all neutral. They're taking and predetermining and presupposing the issue. That is, in my opinion, wrong. That is absolutely, and I'm, to the point made, I'm no lawyer, but man, I think I understand when you're trying to deal with a situation, you're trying to protect people's rights, and you try to represent all Canadians in this House, you got to take some appropriate measures to ensure that no one is prejudiced by some of the actions that are being taken. And when you look at some of the issues in regards to other governments and other levels, oh my gosh, I mean, there's a long list of allegations and misguided measures taken by all governments. I'm not going to go into the Greenbelt issues or the license plates or matters relating to other matters. What we need to do is ensure that we uncover any wrongdoing, protect those that are engaged, and make certain that those that have done wrongdoing are held accountable and are exposed. And that is important. So the precedent that we worry about here that Mrs. Kuzi is talking about is a precedent of actually dissuading witnesses to appear and acting as though we're lynching everybody that comes into this place and then putting people at risk. So the matter is, we've been doing this for 5 to 6 months. We have a number of witnesses that appear before us. We've taken countless amounts of information. The investigators and those that are taking precautions, including our CMP and others, are, from what I understand, very concerned with the confidentiality measures and the obstruction that's taken place in the integrity of the investigation that puts at risk. I think we wait now until we have the results of those investigations. It doesn't seem effective by what we are doing here. And let's move on to other matters of consequence, like the Canada Post motion, like other things that I know are relevant that people want to see. We want to see results. We want to see resolution to this issue. And that's not obstructing you. You're obstructing. I think the members opposite are actually making it worse to let these investigators do their job effectively. So I will support the move to release Mr. Lafleur from this kangaroo court for today and ensure that we not proceed forward until we get proper results.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I support what I say. That's it, Mr. Chair.
I was waiting for you to say something derogatory about the man who, or the person who moved the motion, but you'd support it anyways. That being said, I do have Mr. Zinras up next, and we have a hard stop at 7:07. Mr. Jena?
I'll strike, Chair.
Svignola, then Mr. Backrack, then Mr. Brock. Mrs. Svignola.
En ce qui me concerne, je ne serai pas.
As far as I'm concerned, I won't speak at any length. I think that all of us are getting stuck. I'm waiting for everyone to put their headphones on to hear the wise things I'll be saying. So, the art of giving each other bouquets. So I think we all agree on the fact that we have to ask Mr. Lafleur, or that we should rather allow him to leave. The reasons why we're doing this depends on which party you're on. It's not a question of stopping this study by ArriveCan, but simply to pause it until the investigations have taken place, because all of us want to understand what happened and then present solutions. I have the impression I'm repeating myself. And find solutions to improve the processes, the procurement processes especially, and make sure that nobody can take advantage of the process, of the faults in the process, if there are such faults or defects. So now we have a little less than 22 minutes. So if we want to do committee work, we all spoke in an impassioned and intelligent way on the topic. I propose that we now proceed to deal with the committee business.
Thanks, Mrs. Vignola. That motion is a dilatory motion. I think that perhaps what was intended at the very beginning. So the motion is to proceed to committee business, which would end this and bring us into our next point, which will be our in-camera committee business. So we'll take a recorded vote. It's to move to the next, to move to committee business. Well, Mr. Backrack, we do have a dilatory motion, so I don't think we can entertain a point of order.
Oh, really? Even points of order aren't in order?
Not when we have a dilatory motion brings us to an immediate vote, and we can't do points of order during the vote.
Ms. Vignola, her intention may not actually be achieved by the motion she put forward, but she can. It's in order, so I'll just vote.
The motion is to go to committee business. It's a dilatory motion that we have to vote on. That takes us to the next, to the next part, the committee business on the schedule, when the agenda was to.
What happens to the witness once that happens?
Witness, we dismiss everyone from the room because the committee business is in camera. And I suspect that, sorry, 2 seconds, I'm having some whisper everywhere. Yeah, so we're going to committee business. Basically, we send Mr. Lafleur away, and we can, with our, have him come back at a future time at the committee's pleasure. No offense, Mr. Lafleur, but when the committee decides for him to return.
So we're dismissing the witness.
Well, it's not dismissing the witness, but it's effectively dismissing the witness. So it's not confirming Mr. Sousa's original motion. It's to move to committee business, and we will go to the vote right now. Are we clear on what we're doing? We're clear. We can move forward with the vote, everyone? Yeah. Perfect. No, we're moving to the vote. I've said twice already. With dilatory motion, we're going to the vote.
Mr. Baines?
Thank your team.
Yes.
I think your team will direct you.
Mr. Johari?
Favor?
Mr. Sousa?
Yeah. Yes.
Ms. Gainey?
Yes.
Mr. Kazmierczak?
Yes.
Mr. Brock?
No.
Mr. Genuis?
No.
Ms. Kuzi?
Against.
Madame Vignola?
Pour.
Mr. Backrack?
In favor.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
Yeah, the motion passes. Even I can do that math. With me a couple seconds, everyone. Yes, I'll come to you in a second. Go ahead, Mr. Sousa.
I move to go back in public.
We are in public.
I move a notice of motion. I do, and I have it in both languages.
Would you care to distribute it?
It's being sent, I believe, to the various. It's being sent now. I'd like to read it if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Sousa.
That pursuant to Standing Order 108-3C, the committee undertake a study on the government's work towards regulatory modernization. That the committee examine matters including examining how to reduce the unnecessary administrative burden for individuals and small business, examining how to simplify regulatory processes, including certifications, codes of practice, without the need to make regulatory changes and the introduction of regulatory sandboxes, cutting unnecessary red tape to make cross-border trade easier through more consistent and coherent rules across governments, such as adopting national standards more widely, examining regulations that may impede international competitiveness. That the committee allocate 4 meetings to conduct this study, that witnesses be submitted to the clerk of the committee by February 21st, 2024, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government
Point of
table
order, Chair.
a comprehensive response.
Is the member moving a motion or providing a notice of motion? Because he said he's moving a notice of motion.
I'm reading a notice that's being provided, but I am moving the motion.
You're either providing
I am
a notice
moving a
or moving the
motion,
motion.
and I'm reading the notice of motion that's been provided.
It's not a notice of motion if you're
I'm
moving
moving
it.
the motion, man.
Okay.
I think we understand the intent, but we just perhaps advise in the future that we are more.
There's a green book. It's called the
that
Standing
we
Orders.
provide things
the House of Commons.
following our proper
It's
procedures.
available in both official languages. Am I on the list, Chair?
Yeah, we'll start a speaking list, Mr. Generous. The motion is going out in both languages. No, Mr. Fleur, you can hang around here for the next 6 months until we're ready for you to.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, let me interrupt for 2 seconds. I have to check something with the clerk as well before we proceed. But yeah, Mr. Lafleur, thanks again for being here and short notice. We will see you again. Mr. Janice, are you speaking on this motion?
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you, Chair. This committee has important unfinished business with regard to the Arrive scam scandal. And just briefly on the substance of the Arrive scam scandal, I am flabbergasted by some of the comments that Liberals have made saying this committee hasn't done anything. We haven't seen anything. I wonder what committee they've been at, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. Over the last 4 months, we have heard incredible testimony. Senior public servants accusing each other of lying in a parliamentary committee.
Chair.
And
order,
this is.
Sorry, Mr.
He's
Generous,
going to try to
just a moment.
correct me on the rules.
This
is relevant.
You know him
Sousa.
well, but I just wanted the relevance of this commentary regarding.
You proposed a motion about the
do.
committee's agenda. It's of course relevant.
And we always allow a very wide breadth for discussion, but go ahead, Mr. Janice.
And this is a narrow breadth. You propose a motion about the committee's agenda, and I'm discussing the committee's agenda, Mr. Sousa. This committee has, for the last 4 months, heard absolutely breathtaking testimony. Various senior public servants and whistleblowers accusing each other of lying, presenting devastating testimony about a $54 million contract for the development of an app that went to a company that had no internal capacity to develop apps or do IT work whatsoever. We gave $54 million to a company that subcontracted all of the actual work. And we've already seen just a devastating report from the procurement ombudsman. We have an auditor general's report coming out. So there's the RCMP are investigating. The procurement ombudsman released a report. The auditor general's investigating. This committee's been investigating. And the Liberal members say, oh, nothing's going on here. Nothing's going on. What's there to study, guys? Come on. Well, when the Liberals think nothing's going on, when they say there's nothing to see here, Mr. Speaker, that tells Conservatives that we need to dig even deeper. There's important business that this committee had to deal with in the context of the Arrive scam scandal, and I believe that was the intention of the committee business. Nonetheless, the Liberals have made clear that they want to hide the information, that they don't want to have this discussion, and they moved a motion on another subject that the committee has not even seen yet. So I'm sorry, when you table drop a motion that has not been distributed to members when there's 12 minutes left in the committee, that is not a serious attempt to adjudicate the issue. We will review the motion that Mr. Sousa has moved in good time. We will consider it. We will evaluate it. But this is obviously fundamentally not what this is about. This is about Mr. Sousa building on his scandalous record of the Wynne government, trying to divert and bury the Arrive scam scandal investigation. And since the Liberals are clearly opposed to doing that work, since they have sought to dismiss the witness that we had important questions for today, I think there's just nothing left to be done. So on that note, Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Colleagues, we'll have a
Arrive
vote.
can's not under investigation.
Okay.
But Arrive
So
can's
motion
not under
to
investigation,
adjourn
is it?
debate. Adjourn the meeting. Okay. All right. Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Johari?
Support.
Mr. Kazmierczyk?
Or
Mr. Sousa?
No.
Miss
Stand up for yourself, Charles.
Ms. Gainey?
Sorry, are we voting to adjourn?
To adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
Throw you under the bus, Charles.
Mr. Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Genuis?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Madame Vignella?
Wait.
Mr. Backrack?
Opposed.
Okay, while the vote, colleagues, please, while the vote is being tabulated, I want to get in very quickly. We had canceled Monday because of the AG, but we do have some pressing issues we got to do in camera, budget, and some other things that are preventing us to move forward on a couple things. I'm going to maybe try to fill in 30 minutes on Monday around the AG, but I'll discuss this stuff really is important. I have to get to it. So I'll follow up and let everyone know.
Yeah, but I think the AG meeting is going to be over by 11, so we could have our.
We just passed the motion to adjourn.
Adjourned. Oh, I just got the vote and we are adjourned.